Welcome to Kin News at 7. I'm Don Maroon. Tonight's top stories. Tamara Cowell and the never-ending email saga. Will it ever end? You be the judge. Recent poll says no. Sailor Dan sightings. If you haven't got a photo with him, you better get one right away. Pixar has recruited him for their newest movie, Hobos and Boats. A kinesiology professor by the name of Bruce Craven will be announcing his retirement from physiotherapy in order to promote his newest book, Wise and Wealthy, like me. But tonight's top story, an in-depth analysis, a dangerous craze that has been sweeping the Saskatchewan prairies. Students have been going to great lengths in order to extend their snowboarding season. There are two major problems with this. The first being that we're in Saskatchewan. The second, it's snowboarding in Saskatchewan. We're going live on location with Rebecca Phalange with more.
Thank you, Don Maroon. Hi, this is Rebecca Phalange live on location at beautiful Lakeview Hill. And we are doing a report on snowboarding and wrist injuries. The total number of snowboarding injuries has risen in recent years due to an increase in popularity of the sport in snow culture, media, and Sask folk. The most important factor with regards to injuries is that snowboarders are not able to sidestep to recover their balance because both feet are bound to the board. Therefore, a snowboarder is more inclined to attempt to brace their fall with an outstretched arm. Often beginner snowboarders are injured while simply attempting to sit down to rest. Wrist fractures are the most common type of injury among snowboarders. There is an estimated 95,000 wrist fractures each year among snowboarders worldwide. Typical damage sustained to the wrist in a fall ranges from a sprain of the ligaments that connect the ulnar and radius bones of the forearm at the joint to a single or multiple fracture of one of the many carpal bones of the wrist. One bone that is particularly vulnerable to fracture in this fashion is the scaphoid bone, located in the wrist immediately below the thumb joint. The scaphoid is the only bone to bridge both the proximal and distal carpal rows, thus making it more susceptible to injury. Within this newscast, when we refer to a fracture of the wrist, we will be alluding to the Colles fracture. The Colles fracture is a fracture of the radius bone just above the forearm, which is just above the wrist. The fracture occurs laterally at the proximal portion of the distal head of the radius. If you don't know where that is, good luck on the final.
That's a lot to handle.
Falling is the predominant mechanism of upper extremity injuries. When you lose your balance and are falling, the natural instinct is to outstretch a hand to save yourself. The impact of falling onto a hard snow surface or grassy surface with any degree of force or speed will result in the risk of fracturing the wrist. The three classifications to assess Colles fractures in the wrist are
Frickman. Universal.
Malone.
I'm now going to talk briefly about assessing the situation. So, this gentleman is demonstrating perfectly what not to do. You should never place yourself in an area where other snowboarders or skiers cannot see you. So, you should be sitting, resting atop the hill rather than on the cliff so that the people around you can see you and you are not harming them as well as yourself. Excuse me, sir, would you mind telling me what you were doing wrong in this situation and what you should be doing differently?
Yeah, I just fell and kind of hurt myself, so I guess in the future I should maybe move away from the top of the hill so people just coming over the hill can see me and they don't crash into me.
Sir, now that you're taking responsibility for the situation, what would you do next?
I think I would probably apply the RICE method. Rest, ice, compression, and elevate.
Sounds delicious.
If I came across another snowboarder on the hill that was in need of some help, I would apply an emergency action plan through the HOPS assessment. History. I would ask how the accident happened if I did not see it for myself. Observation. I would check for swelling and check for discoloration of the skin. Palpation. Palpate the injured arm on both the radius and ulna, medially and distally. And special tests. The person may be in too much pain to progress through active and passive tests, so I would safely assume that the wrist is broken and proceed to seek medical attention.
There are 3 people you want in an emergency situation: charge person, call person, control person.
Thanks, Don.
Oh, do one more time.
Thanks, Don.
Random snowboarder man, please tell me about the return to play guidelines that you followed after you fractured your wrist.
Yeah, that was a bad wipeout. We were just hitting some just buttery jumps out the hill there, and I fractured my wrist. Yeah, doctor said just rest it, 6 to 8 weeks. I got an x-ray every couple of weeks too, just to see how the progress was going. He just gave me some just specific exercises to work on to regain my strength, and yeah, once the swelling went down, I went for a checkup. He told me I had active pain-free range of motion, and I was good to go.
Active pain-free range of motion is key, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We caught up with Dr. Samsonite to share his knowledge with us on prevention of wrist injuries. Dr. Samsonite!
Oh, hey there. I was just finishing.
We were wondering if you could share your knowledge with us in the area of prevention of wrist injuries in snowboarding.
Well, to prevent wrist injuries, you should have a thorough background check before you partake in participation in snowboarding. Questions such as, have you injured your wrist in the past, or if you wore wrist guards in the past, should be questioned. And this will give you a background on any injuries they've suffered in the past, and will help to re-injure these injuries.
Now, Dr. Samsonite, are there any strength or functional tests that you should do?
It's good that you asked that. You can do a simple extension or flexion wrist, just to make sure that snowboarders have the proper strength to participate in the activity. If they don't have the proper strength, they'll be more susceptible to injury, and we don't want that.
No, we don't. Now, is it myth or fact that wrist guards and tapings help?
Oh, it's fact. Those that we screen and are more susceptible to injury should wear wrist guards or taping. It gives the proper support to the wrist so they don't go back into hyperextension. They should also be done or fitted properly, because if they're not fitted properly, they won't be able to perform at their highest functional ability. So yes, wrist guards do help.
Now, what would you say to would-be snowboarders?
I would just make sure they know how to fall properly. Make sure they know how to sit down properly without putting all their weight onto their wrists. And also, if they feel pain at any time during snowboarding in the wrists, make sure to tell someone and not ignore it, because the pain can get worse and the injury can get worse, and possibly detriment their performance in the future.
And that would just be awful. Dr. Samsonite, would you mind demonstrating some rehabilitation exercises?
Not at all. First of all, if they're looking to regain the strength back in their wrists, they can just simply take 1 or 2 pound weights, start small, and just do simple flexion exercises of the wrist and extension exercises of the wrist, just to gain back the strength and functionality in their fractured wrist. You can even do exercises without weight and just simply going like this with your own.
So, sort of gaining back the range of motion in your wrist.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Are you a doctor?
Well.
Rolling.
What else would you like to demonstrate for us, Dr. Samsonite?
I'll do a chest pass with the medicine ball. Typically, you'd start with a lighter ball than this, volleyball or beach volleyball, just something that's lighter in weight. Just simple chest passes against the wall, letting your wrists absorb the ball, and just gaining that strength and functionality again, like in the pass exercise, back in your wrist.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Samsonite.
You're very welcome.
And that's it for injuries in snowboarding. Back to you, Don Maroon.
You're on.
And that concludes our evening news for tonight. Tune in tomorrow so you can catch Rebecca Phalange in What Walks Around Outside at Night. And I shouldn't be out here this late. I'm Don Maroon. You stay classy. Stay classy. We'll leave you tonight with what everyone came here to see. Some good old-fashioned wipeouts.